Cool, right. So I'm Simon Oliver, and I'm going to talk to you today. The title of the talk is So You Have a Great Idea, What Next? So this is really a collection of learnings from books, presentations, other people's ideas, but I've been in the process over the last year trying to improve some gaps in my skill set. Mistakes I made in previous projects. As I was starting a new project, I wanted to work out a better process, choosing what it is that I work on, and then how to make sure that that has the best chance of success. So my background, I formed Handcircus about 10 years ago now. So this is back in the early days of the iPhone. We charged $10 for a downloadable game, and people happily paid. So this is pre-free to play, very different period of time. We then launched a sequel in 2009, again we still paid, but then as the App Store moved towards free to play, it was an area that I didn't really have a deep understanding of. So we pivoted over to PlayStation 3. Developed a title called Bockaboo. It was a pub-fun title, downloadable title. And that was an interesting title. A lot of learnings there in terms of really understanding the market, trying to make something that was feasible. And for me, it was a little bit of a struggle in terms of the project, but really valuable in terms of insight gained from developing that project. We then went back to mobile with Seabeard a few years ago. This time really embracing free-to-play, embracing the service nature of games on mobile largely now. And at the moment working on a brand new series of titles, so a little bit too early to talk about this yet, but I can talk about the principles behind it. And so what I was really trying to do, as I said, is learn from things that we did before, mistakes that were made, to try and create a more robust process. It's something that a lot of people have talked about online, so there's been some great talks by Adam Saltzman about exactly this process, the guys at Spryfox, and there's some great resources out there in terms of product management and how to develop the product that really resonates with your players. So it's really a collection of all those learnings. So the focus of this talk was really two questions that I wanted to answer myself. So this has been the really direction of the journey that I've gone on. The first is, how can I establish whether this idea is worth pursuing? How can I make sure that this, of all the other ideas that I've had, this is the one that I think has the best strength, or we as a studio has the best chance of succeeding? And then secondly, now that I've chosen this idea, how do I know that this is the best place for success? How can I work out what the risks are? How can I improve that process? So that's really what this talk is all about. So really there's four main sections to this. The first is establishing product vision, so having a single crystalline version of what it is that you're hoping to make, something that you can communicate with your team, something to communicate with the people you're hoping are going to give you money if you're looking for funding, and ultimately something that you're going to be able to communicate to your players. Next is product strategy. This is how you turn your idea into reality. So this is how you take crystallized vision and then transform it into a strategy of production and ultimately marketing and everything that follows. Then risks and validation. So you have this strategy, how can you make sure that this is something that will work? And what can you do to test against that? And then lastly, iteration. Once you've gone through that process of testing, what can you then feed back into the original product vision and strategy to make it more robust? So the product vision, this is the single most important part of this process. It's the why you do what you're going to be doing. It's the ultimate reason for creating your product. It describes the positive change the product should bring about. So this section is a great book called Strategize by Roman Pichler, and some of this content is available online. So there's a link at the bottom there. And he talks about the process of creating and what's needed in a great product vision. And the four things that are needed, first of all, it should be big. You should make your product vision broad and ambitious so that it engages people and provides that momentum. It needs to be something that's exciting, something that's ambitious, something people can really get behind. It's also important that it's shared. Amongst the people in your studio, amongst the people working on it, it can't just be something that you're pushing. They need to come along for the ride, or if it's their vision, they need to share it with you and everyone else in your team so that you can push it forward. If you don't have that, then it's not going to be effective. And this is even before you start talking to people outside. So it needs to be shared amongst the real core members of the people that are going to be bringing this to life. It needs to be inspiring. Your vision should therefore motivate people, connect them to the product, and inspire them. So this is going to be the reason why your team get out of bed in the morning to go and work on it. It's going to be the reason why people get excited talking about it online. There needs to be an inspiring component to your product vision. And lastly, most importantly, it needs to be concise. It has to be something you can communicate. If it takes you 5 minutes and lots of diagrams to explain what it is that you're making, it's not something that people are going to be able to talk about and communicate amongst themselves. So if you haven't got something that's concise, it's going to be hard to really make it fly. So the nice thing is you can really iterate on that, keep trying it. It's such a useful thing to have at any point in the project because it's something that you can keep going back to and referencing. You can say, does this feature, this piece of content, this character, any element of the production, does this resonate with the original vision? Does this resonate with what it is that we were going to make? And if it doesn't, you can revise that. So it's something you can look back and validate. The nice thing is it's something that's super testable as well. Even from day one, you can go and start talking to friends, talking to potential customers, talking to anyone and say, what do you think? Is this something that resonates with you, something that excites you? So even before you've done the first bit of production, you can start getting an indication as to whether or not this is something that might work. And again, this is something that you need to bring along with everyone that you meet to, all interactions from customers to people you're going to be looking for funding. The direction you want to have super excitement. You want to have people that is blown away by the vision. It needs to be infectious. It needs to be something that blows them away. Let's take a look at some example product visions. So these are a few games that I think have got a really clear, really great, really inspiring product vision, something that really taps into those qualities I mentioned before. So Minecraft, product vision is infinite sandbox world. You know, the way that people talk about it, they get it. It was something that was unlike, almost everything on the market at the time. It was something that resonated so clearly. It was something that people could talk to other players, to other fans of the game about. It certainly was big, it was inspiring, and it was concise. I think another one of the more recent Batman games, the vision is be Batman. It's something that no other games have really delivered. It's something that people really wanted to do. And I think it did it so wonderfully, concisely, and effectively. So from our perspective, the product vision for Seabed was a world of adventure in your pocket. This is something we wanted to create a kind of Animal Crossing-like experience where it felt like there was a world in your phone. Anytime you pick it up, there was something going on. There was something interesting to do. So in terms of bad examples, you really don't want to mix in your own personal ambitions. So things like, I want to learn to make an FPS in Unity. That's a worthy personal ambition, but that's not something that's going to get people excited. It's not going to get people to join your team. It's not going to get people to buy the game. Similarly, everyone is making battle royale games right now. We should make one. Now that may be a valid business strategy if you think there's an opportunity to go into that space, but again, that's not going to be something that really inspires people to work on the game. It's not going to be something that really inspires players if there's already something else like that. So that kind of Me Too thing. Same with Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls. We should make a Dark Souls game. It's great. If that's your passion, think about a way that you can create a spin on it. What's going to be the thing that differentiates it? Not, I'm passionate about this particular product. Also, I want to be rich. I want to win an award. This isn't really going to be something that you can get people behind in any way. So I don't know if any of you have heard of a guy called Simon Sinek. He's a guy that did a really good TED talk it was called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And he wrote a book called Start With Why. And he really talks about the importance of the product vision or company vision, above that, as being the thing that really leads to great products, customers that engage with it, and passionate members of your team. So you have this idea of the golden circle, the core of which is why you do what it is that you do. The how is how you implement that, so kind of the product strategy, and the what, the kind of the more granular details of what it is that you're going to be doing. The actual products you're going to make and the details of those products. But the nice thing is, everything comes from downstream. And if you don't have that, if you start thinking about the what too early, you're not going to have something that truly resonates with your customers. So if you've got 16 minutes of your time, I highly recommend checking out this TED Talk. So then moving on to the product strategy. So as I said, this is really how you translate your great product vision. You have an amazing vision, you've got a great idea. This is about how you implement it, how you translate it into reality. And this comes in a number of key areas. First of all, really thinking about the market. What is the market for this game? Who are the players? Thinking about personas, the type of people that are going to be playing. Then thinking about the key features. This is really essential for marketing. Again, what are going to be the things that people talk about when they talk about your game? What is it that you can do? Maybe it's the theme, maybe it's the art direction. The key features that allow your game to stand out amongst everybody else's. And then lastly, really thinking about the business goals. It might be straightforward. It might be that you want to make money. It might just be about revenue. The only thing you really want to do is, drive revenue to your company. But there might be secondary goals in terms of community building, marketing, building your brand. So first of all, thinking about market. So thinking about what the market is that the product addresses. At its core, you're thinking about platforms. Are you making something for PlayStation 3, the Switch? The genre, so the type of game you're going to make, the business model you're going to employ, and the theme of the game you're making. And there's a number of other areas there that really define the market, but with those core attributes, you can really start digging into what the opportunity is in the market, the types of games that are out there in the space, how well they're doing, and then secondly, you want to think about who it is that's going to be playing the game. So who are the customers of the game? So this is, Persona's system is really great for doing this. So kind of really thinking and planning out about who they might be, the type of people that you have potentially as customers for your game. So on the market side, you might have an example, I'm making a free-to-play, fantasy-themed PC MMO, or I'm making a downloadable Lovecraftian action-adventure on PC and Xbox. And on the personas, I go into a little bit more detail about how you can construct your personas. So the nice thing about personas is they give you a face onto which you can really test your product against. There's a great link to the bottom, Games Analytics, to put a post on how you can generate personas for your titles. So I think really ultimately what you're trying to do with this is to, rather than take kind of abstract, general, I think these type of people are playing this game, you can create personas that really reflect the likely customers of your game. And you can measure, again, everything that you do against whether or not it would resonate with these particular players. So for example, if you're making something for families and you're thinking about making a co-op feature, that definitely would resonate with your personas. If you're making something that is really for a more kind of hard competitive player than having a single player campaign, it might not fit with those personas. So just by drawing these out, putting them up on the wall and really thinking about them, I think it helps guide you in a direction where you'll end up in a better place for the product that you're creating, the game you're creating. So a few examples of the types of attributes you can think about when you're creating a persona. Why do they play the game? What is it they like about the game? What is it their motivations for playing? And then longer term, what are their goals? What's their longer term motivation for playing the game? Is it achievement? Think in terms of battle types or the kind of longer term ambitions that they have. Is it socializing? Is it achievement? Demographics can be useful too. So really thinking about age, thinking about gender, thinking about status, in terms of employment, thinking about the free time they might have. This will really allow you to shape the products in terms of maybe session length, in terms of price. So that can be super useful to do that. But you don't need to overthink too much about it, but it helps really shape them into real people rather than being abstracted. Have a think about what else they play, in terms of complementary games, in terms of competitive games. Having a think about their non-gaming interests, what they do outside, and tied into that, their kind of social media and community interaction. This can be really important in terms of thinking about virality. If this is a game that you're going to be dependent on word of mouth in terms of people talking to other people about it, thinking about their social community interaction in terms of whether you build that out or whether you build features into the game to encourage those kind of interactions. Device is an important one too. Certainly if you're thinking about mobile or you're thinking about PC, what kind of device are they using? If they're using low-end smartphones, you need to really think about that in terms of the development process. If you're developing for PC and you're only depending on something that's like a super high-end rig, then you need to make sure that the people that are going to be playing the game, that matches. Think about the amount of time they spend gaming, and then where, when, how often do they play? Are they just playing 10 minutes every day on the commute? Are they having 4 or 5 hour sessions at the end of their day where they just sit down and just want to consume and play online with friends? So really going through that process can be helpful. And of course, you can refine that as you go through and redevelop these personas so you get to understand your audience better. So the next one is key features or hooks. So these are the things that really make your game stand out, the features. And it ties into the product vision. These are the things that really underpin your product vision, that really facilitate that product vision from happening. Top level, it's theme. That can be, one of the things that really stands out about your game. Not all games have this, but in some cases it can be enormously useful. I think Red Dead Redemption is one of the games that really resonates with me when I think about this, because it was something that really took a theme that was massively underutilized, but had a huge potential audience. No one had really done that Western-themed game anywhere near as well. So for that was the thing that for me was the hook. I'm a big fan of Western movies and games, and this was a hugely exciting title for me. Art direction can be huge as well. Thinking about Journey, the thing that grabbed me first of all was the screenshots, just the way that it looks absolutely stunning. So that can be something that you can really think about when you think about the things that really make your game stand out. It might be mechanics or systems, whether that's amazing AI, whether it's things that allow you to interact with the game, whether it's an outstanding physics engine. This could be something that you can really talk about and consider when you're thinking about the way that people communicate about your game. It could be that your team members, or potentially people that join the team for this, have got a particular pedigree. Maybe games you released before, maybe you're working with a musician that's really well known. That's something, again, you can talk about when you communicate about the game. So, to give you some examples of key features that I think are particularly effective in games. Don't know if any of you have seen Sable that was announced in the last week or so. Stunning. The moment you see it, that amazing kind of French comic Mobius vibe about it, it spread like wildfire because it had this really unique, really beautiful look that hadn't really been done much anywhere else before. So I think that's a great example of people being excited about a particular feature. And so that's certainly how I found out about it. And the thing I know most about it is the visual side rather than the other aspects of the game. I thought clay books, simulated tactile clay, for me that was the thing I got excited about. I saw, videos of it going around. I love the aesthetic, I love the mechanics. It's got this really just juicy kind of look to it that makes me want to pick it up and play with it. I think that's a hugely effective, aspect, a hugely effective feature of this game that really resonates, with the audience. Rocksmith, really interesting. One of the key features there is you learn to play a real instrument. So you're not playing on a piece of plastic that you've already got. Guitar, you can plug it in and use it. You're learning to play a real guitar. So I think that's a great hook. Thinking about the amazing features in Scribblenauts of being able to spawn any object. That went hugely viral, just the weird and random things that you can put in there. They have Abraham Lincoln or a seatbelt or weird foods. And so it had this hook that people couldn't believe that you could put all these random objects. They crammed so much into the game. So I think that was a hugely effective feature. It's something that people talked about a lot. It was something that wasn't out there before in any capacity, but hugely successful in terms of really making the game stand out. So on the bad example side, the things that you really don't want to do, again, are really thinking about things that might be interesting to you and that you're proud of, but don't really communicate well to your potential player base or the people that you might be talking to bring online the team or potentially ask funding from. So there might be technical aspects. It's amazing that you've written 3 million lines of code, but that's not something that people are going to really care about. If you start talking to people about this when you're communicating about the game, are they really going to care? I don't know if that really delivers the kind of end experience that people are really looking for. It might be that you've made your own custom 3D engine. That is an amazing achievement, something that's enormously challenging. You haven't gone for Unity, you haven't gone for Unreal, but that's not something I think that people are going to really talk about when they talk about your game. It might be commoditized things. Realistic physics. Everyone has realistic physics. It might be you've got AAA graphics. Everyone's using PBR shapers now. It might be you've got multiplayer. Again, this is something that's quite commonplace and it doesn't really stand out. So I think these are examples of sort of things that you don't want to be talking about. Ultimately, you want to be thinking, what features will players talk about to other potential players? So, thinking back to Sable's art direction, or Journey's art direction, or thinking back to, Playbook, these are the things that are just like, oh my god, you can't believe what you can do in this game. You can't believe the way this game looks. It's stunning. I think story's an interesting one as well. If you've got something that's really narrative focused, like Night in the Woods or 80 Days, I think it's absolutely something that you should talk about. But if you are going to talk about your story, make sure that it is something really unique and really special, and it's not something that is, commonplace. Otherwise, it doesn't really become one of those key features. So next, thinking about business goals. So the business goals really capture how your product is going to benefit your company. So as I was saying, it might be that you're really looking to drive revenue. It might be that you're really looking to improve your brand, get your brand out there. But it's important at this stage to really clarify what it is that you're hoping your product to do. So really thinking about what those business goals are. So to give you an example of some of the types of business goals you might choose, obviously revenue, the most obvious choice, it might be direct, it might be through subscription or IPs, it might be through ads. It might be that you're looking to build a community, to build a fan base. It might be this is a longer term thing for you, that you're looking to get more people to follow your company. You want to have something that grow a community of, say, multiplayer users over multiple games. It isn't mutually exclusive. It's not a question of picking one. It might be you have 3 or 4 different objectives with different weights. But it's important to really think about these before to work out whether or not your product strategy will actually deliver what it is that you hope to achieve. Having a think about the marketing side of things as well. Like, are you trying to raise your brand in the space? You might put out a free game because you want to get known. So yeah, marketing can be an absolutely vital part of that. It might be you're looking to test a market opportunity. So say mobile AI came out last summer. You want to find out what the opportunities there are like. You want to find out how hard it is to make a product in this space. You want to find out what people use, what people are looking for. So testing that market opportunity can be hugely effective and a very worthwhile business goal. You might be looking to capture the market. It might be that that this space is going to be huge and you want to get in there first. You want to be one of the first developers in that space. You want to be known for this particular area. It's going to get big and you want to get in there as soon as possible. So that kind of first mover advantage. Another thing that's important at this stage is to really define your KPIs in advance. It's very easy to be a revisionist and go back and I only expected 100 people to download the game. If you do this, you can then validate later on whether or not these business goals are possible, and then once you've launched the product in some capacity, you can test whether or not you actually met them. So yeah, very important at this stage to work out what your KPIs are going to be so you can measure against them further down the line. So you have a product strategy, you have a product vision, congratulations. Now you need to find out whether or not it works, whether or not it's any good. And the key way of doing this is looking at the risks. So these risks are from a book called Inspired by Marty Kagan. And these are available online, so the web link there you can go to and find out this particular bit of information. But I highly recommend the book as well. And he talks about 4 main categories of risk. So the first is value risk. Will the customer buy or choose to use it? Second is usability risk. Can the user figure out how to use it? The third is the feasibility risk. Basically, can you build it? Is it feasible that you can make this product? And the fourth one is the business viability risk. Does this solution work for our business? Basically, can you achieve the business goals that you listed before? And one of the things that Marty Kagan talks about in this book is the 2 ones you really want to focus on are the value risk and the business viability risk. These are the really big risks, and these are the hardest ones to solve. If you've got something that you think delivers value, if you think you've got something that delivers something that against the business goals that you listed earlier, you can solve the usability risks, and there might be different ways of making it happen. But if you can't make 1 or 4 work, it's a lot more challenging. So you really want to address those as early as possible. So on the value risk, will the customer buy or choose to use it? A lot of the times this really comes down to, is the game fun? It might be that the thing that you're making, the objective isn't to entertain, for people to have fun. It might be you're creating something you want to deliver an emotional experience. It might be you're looking to deliver something to scare the shit out of people, which is totally valid in terms of the value of the product. But you want to make sure that it really delivers against that, whatever it is your objectives are. Will the key features or qualities make your game stand out? Are they communicable? So it might be that you've defined and created these things that are amazing, but are very hard to communicate to players. It might be that videos, screenshots, text don't really do them justice, and you really need to sit down and play it for 5-10 minutes to really get the nuance of what it is. And there's some great work by Ryan Clark to talk about how you can work out whether or not these key features or qualities are effective. Does the theme resonate with your target audience? You might be super into your 1970s accounting setting, but maybe the players of your game aren't. You might have think of all these amazing jokes you can squeeze in there, but if the theme doesn't resonate with your player base, it's not really going to sell. They'll be, put away from it. The nice thing is this is the sort of thing you can revise further down the line. Similarly, does the art style resonate with your target audience? I think that's something that we made a mistake with Occupier PlayStation 3, and really underestimated how hardcore the PSN audience was. So made something super cute, family friendly, but ultimately that wasn't the type of look that really resonated with PSN players. If you're making games as a service, it's really hard to make games that are fun over longer periods of time, to make these evergreen games that you can play for months and for years. And also that can apply a lot of pressure on you as a business to continually generate new content. So really thinking about how you're going to be able to develop that, longer term engagement. And if you're making a free-to-play game, are players convinced of the value of your in-game purchases? Have you made an in-game catalog, shop catalog that really offers things that people want to buy? So it's very important to make sure that that's covered at this stage. So thinking about mitigating value risk, there's a few techniques that you can use to really identify and resolve issues that you have with value risk. Prototypes and user testing can be highly effective. It's really important that you focus on testing people that are going to be your target audience. There's a lot of things you can identify at a very initial level of is this fun, just by testing with friends, team members, family members, but ultimately the only people that you need to prove that there's value with are your players. So going through user testing with something really early on can be a good way of finding out whether they find it fun, or terrifying, or emotionally engaging. Surveys can be good as well. There's a nice way of sending a survey out potentially to existing members of your community, offer some kind of incentive, maybe Amazon vouchers or chance to win a prize. Some people do that out of goodwill. If you've got a really, really well-engaged community, they might be willing to help you out answering surveys early on. There are some great things you can do with fake ads and app store listings, particularly if you're on mobile. This is a common thing where you don't actually have a game. Early on, you've got a rough art style, you've got a few different options you want to try in terms of name, in terms of genre. You can find out whether or not this works. So ultimately, this just comes down to making adverts, a few different varieties of adverts, and pushing them up to the store with maybe a landing page that they click through, just saying coming soon. But then you can use this push online, maybe buy 4,000 or 5,000 ads and see what the click-through rate is for any of them. And if you're getting a super low click-through rate, it means there's something about what it is that you're suggesting that isn't really landing with your audience. Competitor analysis, you can find out whether or not this is a genre, whether this is an art direction that has already been established. Are there people that are deriving value from it already? So taking a deep dive. It's a shame it's not easy to find out information about competitors. There's obviously Steam Spy, PC. There's things like App Annie that are relatively expensive to get access to. If you do have anyone that has access to these tools, do what you can or find out online whether the people that have published similar titles have published any details about their sales or their business. There's a great talk by Ryan Clark. He's given a few talks talking about hooks analysis. So he goes into a few successful games and a few less successful games and tries to find out whether, what it is about them that's worked, to try and develop a methodology that allows you to dissect and analyze games to predict whether or not they'd be successful. And it's a hugely interesting talk, so definitely recommend watching, one of those. He delves into his own games, like Crypto the Nectar Dancer, and talks about the hooks, whether it's the mechanics or the theme, the music that made it particularly effective. So usability risk. This is a pretty straightforward one. Can the user figure out how to use it? Is the complexity appropriate to the target audience? Are you making something that is massively overcomplicated? If you're making something for a casual mobile audience, you don't want to be layering system after system and overly complicated UIs. But I guess on the converse side, you want to make sure that you're not making something that's too dull and unengaging. Although I guess it's more of a design question than usability. Is the game easy to learn for the target audience? Again, this is something that can be tested. And if you're on a free-to-play, if you're making a free-to-play game, does the player understand how to make purchases? This is such a vital one. Is your shop easy to find? Does it make sense? Are you communicating what people will actually get when they buy something? There's quite a few ways you can mitigate usability risks. So first of all, thinking about paper prototypes or playable prototypes, and then pairing that up with user testing. And this can be done super early on. Are you making something that is too complicated? Does it make sense? Can people pick it up? And other ways you can improve against that. So next one, a feasibility risk. Can you build it? At the most basic level, do you have access to sufficient development budget? If you're looking to make, a multi-platform, multiplayer, massively multiplayer online RPG, and you've only got 10 grand, there's no chance of you being able to do that. So this is, a really important factor in terms of working out what it is you're going to make. Similarly, do you have the resources to market it? All very well that you can make it, but actually getting in front and effectively marketing is a whole other ballgame. Does your studio have the skills to develop the product? So it might be moving into a new area, like VR or AR, or there's a particular aspect of what you're trying to do that you don't have the skills for, maybe a new art direction, or you're moving from 2D to 3D. Do you have the skills to develop that internally? If not, how hard is it to recruit simple team members? So, it might be that there's a particular area like you're looking at blockchain or deep learning, something where the people are in incredibly high demand. You want to make sure that that's not a risk. If you're planning this out, you're going to get red flag if one of the areas is somewhere where you don't have the team members and it's super hard to employ those people. Also, it might be worth thinking about the development schedule as to whether or not the schedule will be viable for what it is you're trying to do. If you're targeting a console to the end of its life cycle, if you're looking to create something that ties into a particular event, like the Olympics, is it viable that you can make this product in time to hit that particular deadline? Are the technologies required available? If you're looking to make an AR game and you want to have full occlusion of objects in the scene, that's not something you can easily do right now. So you want to make sure that it is viable before you develop an idea that isn't actually technically possible, or certainly enormously challenging at this stage. Similarly, it might not be mature enough. Had a bit of a play earlier last year with looking at AR technologies, and one thing really found is it's really hard to make something that's robust at this stage, and something that people will want to play in any circumstances. So, looking at technology to see whether or not it's really feasible at this point. So how can you mitigate these feasibility risks? Have a think about funding opportunities. Go out, speak to people, find out whether or not there is budget available for the type of thing that you're looking to make and what that budget is. Have a think about whether or not it's possible to have some flexible scope. So whether or not it's possible to make your thing with maybe 20% less budget, 40% less budget. If it ends up that you go schedule over budget a little bit, what happens? I'm really thinking about a strategy for that. It's important. Technical spikes can be great. So a technical spike is where you take an area of work, maybe it's a system or a new mechanic, or maybe an online network interaction that you don't know how complicated it would be to make, and really just try to make a rough implementation or dive into how that would be done. And it turns something that's this black mystery box of question marks in terms of budget and complexity, and starts to flesh it out, so you get a little bit more information as to the feasibility. Also, go and speak to people. If you don't have the skills in-house, you think you might need a partner. There's no harm in going and having light conversations with people as to whether or not they might be interested to help out, to find out the complexity of things that you don't know how to make internally. Whether that's an external partner in terms of providing a particular service or providing a particular asset for your product. Another thing you can do is really have to think about talent pool. So, find out the availability of particular people. If you're looking for, a very distinctive art direction, find out whether or not you can find those people. If you're looking for engineers with a particular skill set, try to build that talent pool as a reference point so you can go back to that at a later date. So you can kind of de-risk the availability of people that join your team. So, I don't know if any of you have heard of the lean startup and the minimum viable product idea. An idea conceived by Eric Ries in his book, The Lean Startup. It's a great read. But he had this idea of just developing products, developing something that's functional as early as possible, so that you end up having something that is testable and something you can validate as early as possible. So it's a harder thing to do in games, I think, because so much needs to come together to represent, the vision that you have, more than just something that's, barely usable. But it's definitely something you can do. It's something that we made mistakes with Seabeard in terms of having something that only really worked right at the very end. So we couldn't test any of the ideas until the point we could test all the ideas. But the idea is, rather than taking the top approach of just building it piece by piece and it's only a functional car when you have everything assembled, going for more the bottom approach of starting with a skateboard and then a scooter and then a bike and then a motorbike and then a car, just building something that at any stage is playable, any stage is validatable. And Adam Saltzman, he gave a great talk, the link at the bottom there, talking about the green light process they use at Finji. And there he talked about this idea of the inverted pyramid. It's a similar idea to MVP. The idea is that if you're building a pyramid, a regular pyramid where you have all of these foundations, a pyramid is only complete when you put the top piece on, finally take shape. An inverted pyramid, take the top pieces off if you don't finish them, it's still an inverted pyramid. And I think there's a subtle difference there about, I think from this perspective, it's less that you need to have something that's fully workable, on day 10. It's more that it still works if you only get to 70%, 80%. You can still have something you can cut big sections out. And that can be tough if you're doing something that's narrative-based, but if you're doing something that's systems and mechanics-based, then it's a little bit easier to think about what it would look like if you took some of these things out. So having something that has that flexibility, I think, is really worth considering. On the business viability risk side, have a think about whether your target audience is big enough, and do they spend? So in the VR context, it's quite a challenging one. It's very easy to look and see the numbers for Gear VR, see the numbers for Cardboard, and say, well, there's tens of millions or hundreds of millions of VR players, but how many of them actually people are going to spend any money, and how many people actually use it on a day-to-day basis? Is the target market too crowded? You go into the Battle Royale market now, and it's a total bloodbath, so you need to make sure that there's a reasonable chance of you succeeding in that space. Are there any major market entry barriers? So this is less of an issue now compared to how it was 10 years ago. It's relatively easy to get your product into most of the main platforms, but there may be a platform you're going after at the moment that's particularly hard because it's closed, or for whatever reason, the things that you need to get on there might be challenging. Are your business goals clear with well-defined KPIs? Do you understand how these goals can be achieved? And then going back to the previous point, have you mapped out opportunities to pivot or revise strategy when you're in the market? So do you have something that is robust enough so that if you don't quite manage to finish it as you intended, you can still release something? Having a think about robustness. So I think on the business viability risk, I think this is a really nice example of the great talk that the guys at Space8 gave about their prototyping process. There's a link to the bottom there. And this is how they measured, they did a kind of first pass against whether or not their prototypes would match the requirements they had for their business. I.e. have something that can really grow to scale, to have something that people could play for months or years. So they had these 5 kind of key elements that were needed in order to deliver against that. So is it mobile first? Is it evergreen, scalable, player-driven content, and the opportunity for mastery? I think this is another really example of a slightly different green light process that they had there, contrasting with the one that Finji used. But I think it's great they've really thought about, how to meet those objectives and test that early on. So you have a great product vision, you have a great product strategy, you know what the risks are, and you test it against them. What do you do with that data now that you know what it is, where the potential problems are? This really comes down to iteration. So the top level you have product vision, this is fed into the strategy. You validated it, but what do you do next? So let's say you found out that it's not going to be possible for you to build what it is that you want to make within budget. Or let's say you found out that nobody likes the theme of your game. At the core level, you can start iterating on the strategy. This is the first pass, but there might be a few things that are fixable where you still maintain that product vision. So it might be, as I said, you revise the theme, you change theme, or you change the budget, you de-scope. But if that doesn't work, you try that a few times and you're really struggling to make it work, it might be worth re-looking at the product vision. And this would be called a pivot. This is where you really think again about what it is that you're looking to achieve. If it's not achievable with a valid product strategy, then it might be worth going back up to the top. And so you've gone through that process a few times, revise the product strategy. It's going to be one of 2 ways. If it hasn't worked out, then it's a fail. But hopefully, you've got something that's fully validated and it passes and you have confidence to go forward and move into production, something that you can sell to potentially get funding. You've got confidence and you can demonstrate that confidence potentially to partners that might help fund your project. So that kind of gives you an overview of the kind of key areas in terms of developing something that hopefully will be a little bit more successful. In terms of reading list, these are the 3 main books that I recommend. Again, this is still a work in progress for me, but these are the books that I found most helpful. Inspired by Marty Kagan, Strategize by Roman Bishner, and then Start with Why on the product vision side by Simon Sinek. And in terms of watching lists, these are the talks that have definitely helped me the most. So Dan Cook from Spry Fox, he talks about from their internal perspective, and they're a really interesting company, talking about how they pick which ideas to work on. The Green Light Process for Commercial Indies by Adam Saltzman and Finji, really, really great talk. I highly recommend that. Some other areas that I didn't cover in the talk today, but hugely interesting. And then lastly, Ryan Clark, he does a regular session called the Clark Tank, where he talks about current trends on Steam. I recommend that as well. This is a talk he gave on his process of consistently making profitable indie games, which worked out very well for him. And that's all from me. So thanks very much. I think we've got a little bit of time for questions, so ask away if you have it. No? All right. Thank you very much.